be discussing the Loadsets View and some associated features, a couple of associated views. Thank you for joining the webinar. I'm going to start with sort of an overview background of what loading is and how it works in zTPF and zTPFGI. So, compiling, building, and loading programs for Trace and zTPF takes place in a couple of different environments, Linux and zTPF. So when developers compile or build, this happens on Linux and creates SOs on Linux. In order to actually load the SOs onto zTPF for testing, in zTPFGI you would click the Load button, and that would create a load set. The load set, this is just sort of under the covers. It's something you might need to know. You probably already know. It creates a loader file called an OLDR file. This OLDR file is transferred to zTPF. And so we can think of that as the first phase of the load. zTPFGI behaves slightly differently, or has more capabilities if you're connected to a system. If you're not connected to a system, that first phase of the load, where the load set is created, placed in the OLDR file, and transferred from Linux to zTPF, that's sort of the first phase, and that happens if you're not connected to a system in zTPFGI. If you are connected to a system in zTPFGI, then we can take it the second phase, the second step, which is to actually take the load sets from containing the SOs from the OLDR file and load them into zTPF and then activate them. And once that's done, you are ready for testing the programs you've compiled and built. So we've started here. You can see my screen with we're not connected to a system. You can tell that because our button is not lit up and the title bar doesn't say we're connected to a system. So now there are several ways you can compile, build, load a program in zTPFGI. I've got a program or a file of a C program open in the editor. I could right-click and say compile, build, or load. I've got it in my projects view. I could right-click here. In the host files view, I could right-click here. Now, the compile, build, and load button up here work on what is focused. So if the editor is focused, this would compile the editor that's focused. But if the file in the projects was focused, these buttons would work on the file in the projects view, and same thing for the host. So now if you have changes in your programs and you click the load button, zTPFGI will actually recompile your programs for you and also do the things we've talked about, such as create a load set and kick off the process to transfer the load set and the OLDR file to zTPF. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to click the load button, and we'll see what happens when we are not connected to a system. So we start getting messages in the output view that tell us about the load. If there were any errors yet, they would appear down here. Then the load set creation dialog box appears. Now this dialog box has slightly fewer options than if we were connected to a system. And we'll see that a little later, that when we say load and we are connected to a system, we have some more checkboxes and radio buttons down here. But if we aren't connected to a system, what we can control is the OLDR name, the load set name, and which system the OLDR file containing the load set, which contains the programs, which system that would be transferred to. So I want to transfer it to this zTPF system. I'll say OK. We get a message down here that it's been created, and that's the feedback we're going to get right now. Okay, so I want to, just while we're here and talking about the feedback that we get during the load, I want to cover a couple of related views which you may not be using yet because they're fairly new. They're only 6 months old. This is the job status view is one of them, and the job details view is the other. And I'll just talk about these very quickly. The job status view, which I have set up to appear over here, gives status about processes such as compiles and loads. So I'm going to click and do the load again. And if you watch the job status view, you'll see that we get a progress bar telling us how much of the load is completed. It pauses while we get the dialog box. And if I say OK, it completes. The job status view, just briefly, has different categories of jobs that are either running or have been completed. If the job is running, it's in the active category, which you might have noticed. Now that it's completed, it's in the completed category. That is, it was completed during this session of zTPFGI. I've loaded several programs during this session of zTPFGI. It has other categories like other sessions today, yesterday, it could have last week, and so forth. If I decide I don't want information about this job anymore, I can delete it, things like that. Now, a useful associated view is the job details view. The job details view is similar to the output view, except that it only gives details about one job, which can be useful if you're running a lot of jobs. You want to isolate the information, don't want to look at everything at once. I can double-click a job, get information just about that job. These are the messages just for that job. The only tabs that are shown here, which are the same as can appear in the output view for the most part, the only tabs shown are the ones that were used by that job. So this could be a useful couple of views for you to use in your loading. You may not need them, but if something is taking a long time, you can also cancel jobs using the job status view. Okay, I'm going to close that. Close that. Now we'll move on. We've talked about, I want to show you now, if you're not connected, if we created the load set and loaded while we're not connected to a system, how can we access those load sets and get them onto the system? So I'm going to connect to a system. This is the system that we transferred the OLDR file to. Say OK. Now the Loadsets View has appeared here. We'll get to this in a moment. For now, I want to show you the Load Sets dialog box. There's several parts to this dialog box. The mask will limit what OLDR files we see. I'm going to limit, since my load sets are beginning with ed, I'm going to limit it to ed. Now we see just the ones I've created. When you click an OLDR file here, it shows you what load sets are actually in the OLDR file. When you click the load set, it will show you what SOs are in the load set. Okay, so I'm just going to, these options here, for source view trace, I will just, I'll tell you about these now too. The source view trace options are what action should we take with the members in your SOs once we have loaded. So you might want to you might want to source view trace everything right away once you've loaded it. If you do, you could click the All button here. That means every member of all the SOs in the load set that can be locked in for trace, we will add them to source view trace for you, so you'll be ready to go. It's very, very efficient. If you want to select things for source view trace, that is, you don't want to source view trace all, you just want a quick way to select them, this will show a dialog box for you and let you select the members. And refresh would actually refresh what's already locked in. And I will demonstrate that in a moment. But first we'll say none. Okay? So we won't do any additional source view trace automatic action after this. The selective activation checkbox. Selective activation means that you're loading the programs, the SOs, the load set. You're loading the load set for yourself only. If selective activation is not selected, you would be loading it system-wide. Now, if you do that, if you load it system-wide, potentially you are affecting other developers. If you load it for yourself, you're affecting yourself and not other developers. So I'm going to do selective activation, which means it will just be loaded for me. Then I'll say load. Okay, you can see it appeared in my Loadsets view. It was already here, and what we do, if it's already loaded, we actually delete it from load and then reload it for you automatically. Okay, so now you can see I've got the members showing in the SO and the load set that we loaded. Let me go back. And if you want to lock for source view trace in the Loadsets view, you can right-click and say Trace and Source View. Now, this is ready for tracing. You can multi-select and do this. If I actually close the files, they're unlocked from trace. I'm going to redo the load view. Here we go. So I've brought the Loadsets dialog back up. You know, we loaded this several times as we prepared for this. So I'm just going to make use of a different OLDR file that we transferred here. And I'm going to say select, show you what happens there. What happens is we get a dialog box which allows us to select which members we want to trace, source view trace immediately. Now you can always come back later and do it. This is not like for all time that you can't do it. This is just a matter of convenience. So if I say OK, then it locks in those two. Do this one more time to demonstrate the refresh option. The refresh option will actually not require me to reselect PRG7A and PRG7B. They will simply automatically be unlocked. Everything will be reloaded, and then they'll be relocked automatically for me, which is very convenient. I'll say load. And you see they've gotten relocked for me. Okay, so now that we're connected to a system, let's talk about the even more convenient way to take the load all the way through, which we sometimes call the Cadillac load because it has all the features. It's luxurious. So I'm going to remove from trace here, although it doesn't matter, I could have left that in. Now I'm going to load, and now remember we are connected to a system now. First part of the process is the same. We get the load set creation dialog box. Now we see the additional options we talked about before. We've got the same source view trace options we looked at in the load sets dialog box. We've also got the option to load selectively or not. I'm going to do that. This checkbox, automatic activation, if I don't check that, it's as if we were not connected to a system. The OLDR file will be transferred to zTPF, but the load sets will not be automatically taken out of it and loaded and activated into zTPF. So most of the time, if you are connected to a system, you will also want to check the automatic activation dialog box. That makes these other options relevant. If this was not checked, source view trace and selective load wouldn't matter. I would have to make those decisions later again. If I check this, the entire Cadillac load will take place. I'm going to say select which programs I want, which members I want to trace, say OK. We get the same dialog box we saw before. This time I think I'll lock in the other one. There we go. And that's what we expected to happen. Okay. So we've talked about what if load sets are already loaded. When you load again, they're deleted and then reloaded for you. Let's talk about the organization in the load sets dialog box. We have sort of the first level is the load set level. The second level would be the SO level. The third level would be the level of members or programs of members in the file. This is a C program, so these are actually C files that are the members. And then underneath that are the names of functions in the files which you can use for function breakpoints. I think we're not going to cover that feature today, but if I double-clicked the name of a function, I actually set a special breakpoint on that, which can be hit. And the member does not have to be locked in for me to do that. I think we'll cover that another time. We won't talk about that level, but let's now the right-click menus in the Loadsets view are just slightly different depending on what you right-click on. If I click on the Loadset level, I get this menu. This will remove all locked members from trace, not just the members in this load set. I get the same menu. If I don't click on anything, on any particular thing, I get the same menu. So this will remove all from source view trace. So if I do this, and that includes another load sets. Deactivate from load is very useful command. It will leave the program, it will leave the load set and its SOs and so forth loaded into zTPF, but they won't be activated anymore. That means that you can temporarily take a load set offline. For example, you might suspect that maybe your program, the load set you've loaded, is the programs in it are causing some problems in the system. So you want to go back to the production load set and programs. So you can temporarily deactivate the load set, test, and see whether the problem goes away without the load set. So let's say you find out the problem does not go away, so it's probably not this load set. Then you could reactivate it. And this saves you from having to go through the whole load process again. Now, so if I deactivate from load, you see this is indicated visually by a gray color in the icons. So now I know that this load set and everything in it is not active. If I want to reactivate it, I can select Activate for Load, and it's back for me. So it's very convenient. Deleting from load now is quite different. Deleting from load will actually delete the load set. it will disappear from your Loadsets view. It will be taken out of zTPF. You'll have to go through the whole load process to get another load set with the same programs back into zTPF. If you select delete from load, delete all deletes all load sets. Load Loadsets brings up the Load Loadsets dialog box. Refreshes the whole view. Okay, now I want to talk about add shared load set to view. So you would use add shared load set to view when there's a set of programs, a load set, a set of programs that someone else has loaded as a load set that you also want to test. So this is good for integrated testing. It's good for, say, team members who are testing the same load set. My team member will tell me, oh, I have this load set I'd like you to help test. Here's the name of it, so I can do add shared load set to view. Again, there's a mask. You want me to go through that again? I might have done that too quickly. Add shared load set to view. First, we get the first part of the dialog box. There might be too many programs on the system, so we're going to ask for a mask so we can limit that. Now we see all the A programs. I could say select this one, say load. You see we have the same source view trace options here. Load is actually bringing it into my view now. It's already loaded on the system, but now I am sharing it, and so that's what load means in this case. So now I have this indicated that this is shared. It's loaded selectively, it's shared with me, and I can help test the programs in this load set. Other options, add SO to view. Add SO to view sounds similar to add shared load sets to view, but add SO to view is used for tracing programs in an SO, and it's the main use is, you can use it even for selective load sets, but it's mainly useful for testing production programs. So you would type in the name of the SO. The SO would be loaded. It has a special sort of fake load set name because it's the SO that we've gotten access to here, not the entire load set. But once I've got that in here, I can lock it in, I can test it, and so forth. If I know, that's been made possible for me on the production system. The drop all added SOs from view does what you would expect. Claim lost load set, just very quickly. The need for this command is kind of unique to certain customers. You would use this if there's a load set out there that for some reason has no one user associated with it, and you need to sort of claim it so you can test it. Maybe you were loading it and for some reason, it never showed up for you. So you can say claim lost load set. And again, this is very similar to the add shared load sets to view dialog box. You can say find load sets. Here's some load sets that are available to be claimed. Here's the source view trace options again. Say I claim one. Okay, now it's claimed, it's not activated, but that's simple to activate for load. And now it's ready for me. Okay, as I said, clicking on the actual SO, for the most part, creates the same options in the right-click menu. Create ECB for SO will actually create an ECB for PRG7. That may or may not be how you want to kick off your program, but that's what that will do. And clicking on the member itself, I can say edit source to load and edit the source without actually locking it in for trace. And deleting. I can delete from Load. I guess we talked about that before. Okay. That covers most of the load sets, the features associated with the load sets. Some things we didn't cover. We didn't cover execution counting, which I will not cover, but I'll show you that once it's locked into view, you can activate execution counting, which is a really nice feature for detecting how many times your lines have been hit in your programs and producing reports in Excel and PDF and things like that. So that's something to investigate. If you haven't used that, you turn it on for your programs, and then you can get reports about how many times the lines have been hit. You get a visual display and things like that.